The poker line from Vortex, such an iconic line in mechanical keyboards as they kind of brought 60% and compact keyboards to the forefront. But since then, there's been a heap of entrants into the market, and of course the whole custom game is huge now. I saw at Computex that the Vortex 4 is on the way, but today we check out the POK3R V2. And this is an engineering sample, so things are subject to change. And as we can see straight away, the V2 is a low profile version of the standard POK3R. Even though it's slimmer, so there's not as much there, it still feels great with no flex as it has the aluminium base, and it has decent weight coming in at just under 500 grams, which isn't all that different to a typical 60%. And yeah, the actual case itself is as thin as you can get for a closed design pretty much. The grey anodized finish on the aluminium looks great, it's even and there's no blemishes or streaking, and it's super simple and is as basic as you can get, pretty much following the design language of the Race 3, Vibe and Core, except with rounded corners. But because of this, there's no mounting plate, which is usually made from steel. So as we can see, we have a floating key design, so the key switches are exposed from the sides, but it's mounted straight to the PCB to keep the case slimmer. Removing the plate and having the floating key design doesn't actually make the keyboard as a whole slimmer, as you're restricted by the key switch itself and the keycaps. But doing this keeps it lighter and makes it appear slimmer, which contributes more than you think in making a product feel thin. That being said, it's a good 5mm shorter than the Core and Race 3. And yep, these are the Cherry MX low profile switches. Unfortunately, there's only two variants of the switch from Cherry, which are the reds and silvers. And just like the standard reds, these are linear, meaning that there's no tactile bump or click and just go straight down. I've expressed in the past that I'm not the biggest fan of these switches, and to be clear, this is just a personal preference, and there will be, and there are people who do like this sort of key switch, but I feel that for a linear key switch, you do need that distance to further appreciate the linear action. That being said, purely on numbers, it isn't too different, so it actuates at 45 grams, which is the same, but has a 1.2mm pre-travel and then 3.2mm total travel. And then silvers are just even shallower. Like the MX Reds, they're not particularly smooth or anything and are quite scratchy to be honest, but burying it in the snow might have had an effect on it, maybe, I don't know, but there is some lube on the stems, so that's why I thought that. Obviously Vortex have a long-standing relationship with Cherry, so I guess that's why they haven't used the K low profile key switches. But yeah, I would love a clicky version of this, as I think the clickies are the best in the low range for me personally. There is some rattle to the stabs, not too bad, but it's quite noticeable on the spacebar. The keycaps are Vortex's own VSA profile in this carbonish colorway with the dark grey mods and off-white and black alphas. Classic colorway which has always looked good, and they're made from about 1.2mm PBT plastic and are double shot, so the legends are another piece of plastic and will never fade away. And this is pretty cool because with their other recent boards they've been die subbed, but looking at them you can quite clearly see that yeah, they're quite inconsistent. The legend thicknesses differ, the numbers are all pretty thick while some of the letters are pretty thin, like the J legend is super thin, so that's unfortunate, but the font or typeface is really nice, so yeah, there's that. The VSA keycap profile is quite similar to the DSA profile, being quite short and uniform, but the tops are much wider with less of a scoop. I don't have any XDA keycaps, but they do look pretty much the same as those. They said that there will be other keycap colorways available, but the case will remain the same color. Unlike the POK3R RGB, this does not have backlit keycaps, but it still has RGB backlighting. There's a bunch of patterns on PN plus 4 or 5, and you can change colors and stuff with PN plus 1, 2, and 3 being the RGB colors. And PN plus Escape shows the color palette that you can choose from. Furthermore, we can have custom lighting layouts, in which there are 3 of. So first pick your backlighting profile with PN plus one of these 3 keys, and then press PN plus either 9 or 0, and go ahead and do whatever you want. The whole lighting thing is pretty confusing, and it always has been with Vortex keyboards, but as you can see, there's not much space for that stuff since it's a 60% keyboard. And being a 60% keyboard, we're missing a lot of primary access to keys and are just left with the main area. 60% is a bit small for me. I personally prefer at least 65%, especially with the dedicated arrow keys, but a heap of people love this layout, and it's compact, saves a good amount of space, and allows for more freedom with your mouse, which is also ergonomically better. Usually Vortex have symbols and other stuff on the front of their keycaps to show the secondary functions, because there are a lot of them, as you got to put the other keys somewhere, so you put them on layers. So it's pretty confusing as the fronts are blank, so you have to take the time and put this all in your head. And just like all other Vortex keyboards, this does support onboard programming, and it's exactly the same. You have your default layer and then 3 additional layers that you can customize, which are accessible via the FN key plus one of these 3 keys. So pick your layer, I'll pick layer 1, then press PN plus left control to enter the macro mode, which will illuminate the caps lock key in green. Then select the key that you want to program and the caps lock will start flashing, and then you do whatever key sequence you want up to 32 keystrokes. And press FN once that's done. You can do that for other keys as well, but if you're done, press PN plus left control to exit the programming mode. So yeah, we still have that classic onboard programming, which is pretty limited, but it's just onboard, so it's okay. This doesn't have the MPC support yet, but I imagine it will after this keyboard is released. And it's much easier to configure the keyboard with an actual web graphical interface. Opening up the keyboard is super simple with just a couple of Phillips head screws under some keycaps. And as you can imagine, it's a very basic construction. The case is made from aluminium as said, and there's a thin plastic sheet just to ensure the pins don't short on the case, as they are trying to keep it as thin as possible. The case is about 7.5mm tall, making the base about 2mm thick. Again, this is only an engineering sample, but we have all the machining marks still here. Not that it really matters because you'll never see it when using it. And yeah, there's no plate, so the switches are just mounted straight to the PCB. Using the low profile switches, this of course can't fit standard MX key switches, as they have a different footprint, and you don't really have an option to replace them with any other besides the low profile silvers. So all up, it's pretty much exactly what I expected and probably what you expected. It is a low profile poker 60% keyboard, but that's not a bad thing at all because it does everything that it sets out to do and delivers it. The design overall is simple, clean and nice to look at with that super slim case. The keycaps feel good, they have that nice VSA profile which is pretty much XDA, and they look nice but from a distance because the lettering is pretty dodgy, which is unfortunate. But it's all about their slimness and making a keyboard around Cherry's low profile key switches. The good thing about them is that they accept normal keycaps, however they are only available in linear form, and that's where the Kale low profiles shine in having much better variety. Mechanical keyboards for me is mainly to do with the feel and typing experience. With these switches, they're not really smooth, the travel is reduced which feels a little odd with linears, but there is still 3.2mm of travel, but they just don't really feel great, and even with everything around it being good, the typing experience isn't there for me. I'm fully aware that switch preference is very personal, and just because I don't like it, that doesn't mean it's bad, but I feel that the key switch won't be as appealing to many as it has some characteristics that most people don't prefer. But disregarding that, it's a solid keyboard and one of the nicer low profile boards I've ever come across. I think adding Bluetooth to this would suit it really nicely and make it into a perfect travel board since it's so compact and slim. It feels great in the hands, the RGB backlighting is always welcome, and with a bit of cleaning up with the keycaps and stabilizers, it makes for a rock solid low profile 60%.